On today's show, a lot of breakout players to talk about from last season. Plus, we're going to take a look ahead. Who's going to be the next NBA's breakout star? That's all straight ahead on today's edition of Locked On NBA Game Night.
When that final buzzer rings, you know it's time for Locked On NBA Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. It's the true NBA fans' one stop for all the action. Every game, every night. It's Locked On NBA Game Night. Tipping off now.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On NBA Game Night. I'm Danny Cunningham from Locked On Cavs, Swipa from Locked On Nuggets. And right here, we talk about every game, every night. Even if there are no games, there are things to talk about, which is exactly what we are going to be doing today, talking about a lot of breakout players in the NBA from last season and the ones that are sure to come this year. But thank you for making Locked On NBA Game Night your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcast, and we are on YouTube as well. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button as we get started here. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our latest content. But Swiper, last year we had so many great breakout stars, guys that, made first-time All-Star teams, first-time All-NBA appearances, so many different things. We're going to dive into our power rankings of last year, but it is time to look ahead at who's going to be the next great breakout star. And I think that there's somebody that is on both of our lists because we've both put together guys that we want to talk about today, but there's one that I know that is a crossover. And I think that it might be a little controversial that he's on this list, considering what he did last year. And that's Jalen Johnson of the Atlanta Hawks. And Jalen was having a great season. I don't think he was going to make an all-star team for the Hawks in the Eastern Conference, but he was having a very good year before he got injured last year. He had that shoulder injury, required surgery, didn't play the rest of the year. The Hawks then kind of went in a little bit of a different direction than I think they were going through the first part of the season. But he's somebody that I look at and say he is going to be, like, when you think about where certain teams slot in the Eastern Conference, I don't know that there's a player that is capable of moving his team up or down more than Jalen Johnson next year.
Yeah, I think Jalen Johnson is going to be in a very unique situation. Last year, you only get 36 games from him, but you get 18.9 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists. Not a great shooter at all, but really good finisher, great driver, obviously just an absolute athletic monster, especially in the half court on a lob or a roll. And he's a lot bigger than people, I think, realize. Now, he's listed at 6'9", but he looks all of 6'9", 6'10". He's extremely long, very athletic. And honestly, when he was playing with Trae Young and them, the Hawks looked like a legitimate Eastern Conference team that could be vying for a playoff spot. They had, I think, DeAndre Hunter coming off the bench. And then on top of that, you're adding in Dyson Daniels having the leap that he had, Onyeka Okongwu. And this year, they're going to have Kristaps Porzingis, Jalen Johnson, Zachary Richichet, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Dyson Daniels, and Trae Young. That's a loaded Eastern Conference roster, and I think he is absolutely going to shine this year. This is a player that I think has potential, especially given the injuries, Danny, in the Eastern Conference. There's a world where he is in the All-Star game next year, and he's getting All-Star starter votes just because he's so dynamic. He's such a powerful finisher, and if he can get his numbers up to 20 to 10 and 5 and just getting like a nice round set of numbers, I think there's a real world where he's an all-star next year, and he's well deserving of it.
Yeah, I don't think that's a crazy thing at all. And for more on Jalen Johnson, let's head on over to Brad Rowland from Locked On Hawks.
My name is Brad Rowland from Locked On Hawks, and Jalen Johnson is technically already a breakout guy from last year in some respects. He averaged 19 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists per game. Only a handful of guys in the league could boast that level of production, but unfortunately, he went down with a injury that is not going to be necessarily threatening long-term, a shoulder issue he had to have surgery on after about half of last season, and that kind of cost him his full-fledged breakout. But if you recall, he was in All-Star conversations, at least on the periphery of All-Star conversations before he went down. And this year, the Hawks are loaded up around him to the point where he actually could get the recognition, perhaps, that he might have deserved last year as a guy taking a step forward in the league. There is a couple areas to focus on for Jalen Johnson as far as what he can do to go to the next level. Number one is his shooting. He knocked out only 31% of his threes last year. But if that jumps back up to the 35-ish range that was in the previous season, combined with some more on-ball creation and the way that he always just stuffs the stat sheet as a rebounder, as a passer, facilitator, etc. Great athlete in transition, running up and down. Just a lot to love about Jalen Johnson, and certainly a big opportunity for him to grow as the number 2 guy in Atlanta.
So the thing that Brad says that I really want to touch on is Jalen Johnson as the number 2 guy. Because I do think if we're talking about him as this breakout candidate, which he certainly is, and he was having a very, very good season last year prior to that injury, as Brad alluded to, with the way that this Hawks roster is built, and I do think that they had a very good offseason. I think they have vaulted themselves up from a team that I just thought was perennially going to be in the play-in the Eastern Conference to a team that I expect to have home court advantage in the first round against whoever they'll play in the postseason, which is a significant jump. But I look at it and say, okay, if I am going to put the Hawks on the same tier in the postseason as the New York Knicks and the Cleveland Cavaliers, I do think that we might need to be talking about Jalen Johnson as Atlanta's best player next year. And I don't think that is that far-fetched.
Well, I think that's very far-fetched. I think, if anything, Danny, this is going to be a reclamation year for Trae Young's resume. I think a lot of people have kind of overstepped on what Trae Young is and just how good he is. And I think a lot of that has to do with the situation around him. But, I didn't realize we were going to pivot here, but I'm perfectly fine with this. I think that the Jalen Johnson piece for me, his elevation is going to be contingent on him playing with Trae Young. And I think that needs to be very clear by me. 24.2 points per game, 11.6 assists last year. Like, people can sneeze at 24 and 11 all they want. He only shot 41% from the field. But the thing is that I think he's going to have a major increase, hopefully, in his efficiency this year with having a much better team around him. He's going to have a true 5-out offense with Kristaps Porzingis in the middle. And I think that's going to be really important for his development, important for Jalen Johnson's development, important for Zachary Richard's development. And if you kind of give yourself a little bit of a deep dive into the Atlanta Hawks situation last year, I think a lot of Atlanta fans would be very encouraged to know that Jalen Johnson and Trae Young, they actually performed well last year. They had a plus 3.9 net rating according to Data Baller. They had a 118.2 offensive rating. They had a 114.3 defensive rating. Now, Danny, if I told you that with the Trae Young-led team defensively, that they were able to have a +4 net rating between the two best players, and they had a 114 defensive rating while having an elite offense on the floor, if I told you that next year, that they'd sustain that for a whole season, could you see them being a top 6 seed?
A top 6 seed, absolutely. I think expectations for them should be top 4 seed with what they did this offseason with, presuming health. And I think that is a tough thing to say about Kristaps Porzingis, just given everything that he has gone through in his career. Like, he has been somebody that, like, the fit between him and Trae Young, and I didn't necessarily plan for this to turn into an entire Atlanta Hawks segment, but the fit between him and Trae Young, I think, is great. It's just like those two need to be able to stay on the floor together. And that is I think, biggest question about the Atlanta Hawks, because let's say Kristaps Porzingis, and I would not expect this to be the number of games that he plays, but let's say he plays 75 games. I think the Hawks are going to be awesome because I think that would be really good. I just think, given the history with him, I think that's probably a little bit ambitious. So I would be, I think, more surprised, given, especially with what we expect from Jalen Johnson. I would be more surprised if the Atlanta Hawks are 7 or 8 than if they got home court advantage in the first round. Like, I think that their goal should be, we should be a top 4 team. We should be planning to play in the second round against the Cavs, the Knicks, the Magic, one of those teams. And whatever happens there, because I don't know that they'd be favored in any of those series, but I do think that they should be a home court team in the first round.
Yeah, look, I think Trae Young has an all-NBA season next year. He's durable. He's going to be there. He's healthy. The only difference between him, I mean, Danny, you don't put up 24 and 11.6, and then you're a top 5 seed. I mean, that's clearly an all-NBA level player, I think, in a regular season fashion, because I think the play on the court will be reflective from a team's record standpoint. But I think that's really always been the issue. But again, to your point, look, if they get Dyson Daniels, Trae Young, Zachary Richard, Jalen Johnson, and Kristaps Porzingis, and then Onyeka Okongwu for 50, 55 games, all of them, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if you told me they were 35 and 20 or 30 and you know what I mean, somewhere around there in terms of their overall record with them. Maybe even a little bit better. Now, maybe not 40 and 15, but there's a real world for them where they're like 38 and 17, and it's like, look, this is a legitimate basketball team in the East, and they can beat anybody in the Eastern Conference playoff format.
Yeah, I think that's if things go well for the Atlanta Hawks. I think that should be the conversation about them 9 months from now when we are starting to gear up for the playoffs.
And last comment here about Jalen Johnson. For fans out there that didn't get a chance to watch him at all this year, a surprising stat. Did you know that last year in the NBA, Jokic is number 1 in passes per game with 76.6? Everybody can kind of understand that.
And that's not surprising.
Tyrese Halliburton, 74.5 passes the game. 0.7 passes the game. Checks out. Trae Young, 61.1 passes per game. Also checks out.
Yep.
36 games played. Jalen Johnson was 3rd in the NBA with 66.1 passes made per game. Y'all, he's not a ball stopper. He plays within the flow of the offense, and he knows how to get on and off the ball. And him and Trae Young throwing 120 passes a game, I'm just telling y'all, look out. They're about to be a high-flying offense next year.
I do think that they will be a good offense. I think they'll be a good team, and I think Jalen Johnson going to have a lot to do with that. But there are other breakout players that we are anticipate having great seasons next year. We're going to talk about some of those guys next, right here on Locked On NBA Game Night. Today's show brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. It's time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making some memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course or off it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. I can personally speak to that. There are some days, particularly last weekend, I had 4 rounds of golf in 3 days. By that 4th and final round of golf, man, I cannot think of anything I needed more than a 5 Hour Energy. And golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors, of course. The grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the bev cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use this promo code Locked On Golf, that is LOCKEDON Golf, to receive 20% off your order. Again, this offer only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscriptions order. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion-flavored 5 Hour Energy shots today. Thank you again for making Locked On NBA Game Night your first listen today and every day. Like we said earlier, you can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. Spent a lot of time talking about Jalen Johnson and the expectations for him. And truthfully, the Atlanta Hawks next year with a full season of Jalen Johnson as opposed to the 36 games he played prior to the shoulder injury he had last year. Who else do you have on your list, Swipa, of guys that you anticipate taking a big step forward next year?
Woo! Man, next year, there's just so many candidates. I'm actually really excited to see how some of this stuff works out. Look, man, call me crazy, but I'm a Donovan Clingan fan. I really like Donovan Clingan's game. He is already a really good defensive anchor in this league. And I think you give him a chance to play with Drew Holiday, a chance to play with another year of Scoot Henderson. Shaedon Sharpe will be there. And then on top of that, you're adding like a lot, I think, a really, really solid motivation coming off of the January to really about April they had last year when they were a top 10 defense. And I think the Blazers really found out a lot about their identity and how they should be playing together. I think getting Anthony Simons out of there, having Drew to be there with having Shaedon Sharpe, with Jeremy Grant, with Denny, with Scoot, Tamani Kamara, that's a really good team. And hey, Denny, you know what? They're not going to make the playoffs. I don't even think they're going to make the play-in, but they're going to be fighting for it, I think, at the end of the year. I think at the end of the year, you're going to look at the conference and say, hey, you know, you're going to see the Kings down there. You're going to see the Memphis Grizzlies, I think, kind of fighting for that area. You're going to see, like, a lot of teams really trying to vie for those last 4 spots into the playoffs. And I just wouldn't be surprised if the Portland Trailblazers are really pushing the Mavericks, possibly, depending on what happens with Kyrie, Sacramento Kings, the Grizzlies. I think more than likely the Warriors. Donovan Clingan is going to be a big part of that. He was showing some chops as a shooter last year too. He's trying to find ways to continue to expand his game and to get everybody else involved. That's like a little bit of an in-between playmaker last year. He only played 20 minutes a game, but I think as his minutes go up, as his opportunities increase, I think the defensive stuff is going to be there. He's going to be an all-defense candidate. And on top of that, he's going to have some positive offensive chops to him. Donovan Clingan is on my list.
So do you think, because I don't disagree with the stuff you said about Portland, obviously like Clingan is already at this point a good defensive anchor, if nothing else, which can get you a long way in this NBA as a guy his size.
Yeah.
Do you think that if he takes that step forward, if he is that breakout player, is their record going to be better than what it was last year? Because they were 36-46 last year. They did miss the play-in, and the final two teams in the play-in, the two teams that finished 9th and 10th, which I believe were Sacramento and Dallas, were both under 500 teams. The Kings were 40-42. Dallas, I believe, was 39-43. Do you think that they're going to be better than they were last year? Can they be around 500? Because that might be good enough when you think about all the other stuff they've added. That might be good enough to get in the play-in.
I think 41 to 38 wins should be about in their goal. But again, maybe I'm underselling it, and I'm acknowledging that, Danny, I could be underselling it. Maybe having Drew Holiday makes that much of a difference. They're going to have veterans in the locker room. Like, maybe that is what really matters. You know, having veterans in the locker room, having Shaedon Sharpe there, getting another year from Scoot Henderson, Jeremy Grant's going to be there, Tamani Kamar's going to be there. And on top of that, like, they have added depth to this team. They've added players to the roster that I think are also going to be contributing. And that includes another healthy year, hopefully, from Robert Williams for however long they're keeping him. And then you got Yang Hansen also coming off the bench. I think 38 to 41 games should be about right. But Danny, man, you know the problem. Like, Golden State, Memphis, the Kings, Dallas, Minnesota, the Clippers, the Lakers. Can I see them being better than any one of those teams next year? Probably not, honestly.
But the thing you do have to remember, too, something's going to go wrong with somebody. It happens to somebody every year. There's going to be a team that we look at that you just mentioned, and maybe it's not from the exact group that you just mentioned, but there's going to be a team from that group that we expect to be a playoff or at least play-in team, and they just have a rotten season because that happens. It's happened to, I think, maybe New Orleans more often than anybody, even if I don't know that they're all that good, but they've had that type of season, feels like 3 times in the last 5 years. It happens to somebody every year, and it's going to happen to somebody, and maybe Portland can be in a position to take advantage. So one of the guys that I have in mind, and I'm curious what you think of whether or not he belongs on this, but I've got Amen Thompson. And he's already a very good player. I think we could probably agree there. A very impactful player, a great defender. But I think that the way we are talking about Amen Thompson right now is going to be much different than the way we're talking about him a year from now. I think that this is going to be the year where he makes his first All-Star team. I think this is going to be a year where and the athleticism that he has is off the charts. Like, I think he is one of the 5 best athletes in the NBA right now at his age. And I think that he's going to have the type of year where we're going to be talking about it and say, you know what? I can see this guy being a top 3 MVP finisher in a few years. I can see this guy being the best player on a championship team, because as constructed, I don't think you say that about him. Because if you do say that, I don't know that you go out and trade for Kevin Durant if you're Houston. But I think that he's going to have the type of breakout year that's going to totally change the way that we nationally talk about Amen Thompson. Like, I could not have enough Amen Thompson stock right now.
Look, the Houston Rockets had a plus 6.9 net rating with him last year, and I think they were an elite defense because of him. He's probably already one of the clear 10 best, and I mean clear. You can rank him, figure that out at some other time, but I think he's one of the 10 best defenders in the league. I think his athleticism, I think his smart, his savvy, his aggression, his rim protection stuff. Look, he has a lot in his game, and I think that Amen Thompson, I'm with you. I said on another platform that I think there's a world where he's an MVP candidate in the next 3 or 4 years or so. Again, I think the offense has to be there. Like, there needs to be a lot of development from him, like as a pull-up shooter, finding other things to his game behind just like a lot of the downhill scoring. Right now, he just has zero gravity as an offensive player on the perimeter, other than like as a driver. And I think he continues to figure some of that stuff out, just like how to fine tool his game as a ball handler. Now, he's already shown some positive traits as an on-ball playmaker. He actually grades out fairly well, like in terms of league-wide, where he grades out in terms of playmaking talent and passing creation. But I think there's just subtlety to his game need to continue to develop in terms of how he's getting to his shot volume, shot quality, And really, Danny, when he figures out, and maybe this is next year, when he figures out how to utilize his downhill momentum, kind of like a Giannis, to use for creating offense for other people, I mean, it could get real nasty. And the Houston Rockets could be a real problem even just this season.
Well, and I'm not going to compare him to Giannis because obviously they're different types of players and they're not sized the same and stuff like that. But when you say Giannis, like the thing that I think changed for him when he really, really took off so many years ago is he got so much stronger. Like Amen Thompson right now is listed at 6'7", 209. When he gets back to camp in late September, early October, is he 6'7", 220? Is he 6'7", 225? Like, I think that as he continues to be this athletic specimen, adding strength to his game, even if he's not going to be a guy that's going to shoot 40% from beyond the arc, because I don't know that that's ever in his future in the NBA. But if he adds that strength, I think that is one of the things too that can take his game really on both ends. And I don't know that there's an entire extra level to get to defensively because he's already so good on that end. But I do think that can be one of the things that really just levels him up as a player.
I agree, and I'm really excited to see his development. You know, he's one of the more unique NBA prospects that we have. And again, not to be outdone, Asar Thompson is also very good as well. He's an elite defender in his own right. Both of them, boy, is going to be max contract players here in the next few years. And, man, it's going to be a race to the top of who can take over NBA supremacy.
Do you have anybody else that you want to run through quickly before we get to our power rankings from last year's breakout candidates?
Yeah, again, Brandon Ingram was already broken out, so this is not necessarily like about Bengram, like becoming some really, truly like different version of himself. But hey, I want to shout out my boy Penn. You know, he covers the Raptors, big Raptors fan. I think that this team could end up being better than a lot of people are giving it credit for. Having RJ Barrett, Brandon Ingram, Emmanuel Quickly, Jakob Poeltl, and Scotty Barnes, there is a world where they're also right with the Hawks of trying to push for a home court advantage in the Eastern Conference. And I think Brandon Ingram, because of his ability as a pull-up shooter, as a playmaker, as a dribbler, I think navigating screens as an offensive player and then having a lot of defensive help around him, there's a very real world where Brandon Ingram earns possibly a starting Eastern Conference forward spot in the All-Star game. I'm just saying. I
think that's a little ambitious.
That
might be a little ambitious.
It is ambitious. Audience, notice I didn't say he will. All I was saying was there's a reality in which Brandon Ingram is able to do this at a very high clip, highly efficient, 22, 23 points per game player, 5-6 assists, and you're like, man, his shot making over the top is great. Remember, he was getting Kevin Durant talks when he came out of college in the first place. He played point guard for a while with the LA Lakers. I'm just saying, perhaps there's a world we get a renaissance kind of season from Brandon Ingram.
I think that is a little ambitious given some of the guys in the Eastern Conference that we should expect to be in the All-Star game. Although there are certainly some slot. I mean, Jason Tatum not being there opens up a front court slot because you could pencil him in as a starter every year. Obviously, that's not going to be the case next year. But I just still think when you look at some of the front court players in the Eastern Conference, when you look at if Paolo Banchero is healthy, he's somebody I think will be in contention for it. I think Evan Mobley will be in contention for it. Obviously, Giannis, you can pencil him in. Karl Anthony Towns was an all-star starter last year. Like, I think that is ambitious, but I like where your head's at. The one other guy that I wanted to mention in Detroit, not Asar Thompson, but Jaden Ivey. Ivey last year only played 30 games, had that nasty leg injury, but he was on his way, I think, to having a very good season, was shooting 41% from three. I think that if you look at what Detroit did this offseason and said, you know what, I'm not really crazy about what moves they made, or I guess more accurately didn't necessarily make. And of course, I think the Malik Beasley situation, you cannot put on them at all. Like that's not their fault whatsoever. But I do think that they can look at their situation and say, we are banking on Jaden Ivey coming back and being a guy similar to who he was in those 30 games before he got hurt. And that can be a big thing that takes them maybe just a smidge above where they were last year.
Look, I think Detroit's going to be a powerhouse. Look, we can actually figure this out too. I mean, the Magic, Cleveland, the Knicks, but are Detroit and Atlanta and Toronto? are they kind of in that next tier of teams? You don't really know what you're going to get, and maybe they are the 4th spot next year. Milwaukee, I guess.
I think Milwaukee's closer than Toronto to them. I
Yeah.
don't like Milwaukee's roster around Giannis. Like, I just don't think they have enough creation in the backcourt, right? Like, Giannis is awesome. Miles Turner's really good. Bobby Portis back I thought a nice move for them, but they're relying, I think, a lot on Kevin Porter Jr. And I just don't know that that's the business you want to be in 2025, as far as where you're getting backcourt creation and somebody that can handle the basketball and create for themselves. Like, that's just in Cole Anthony. Like, he's a fine player, but I just think that's probably asking a little bit much. I would probably say I would have Detroit 5th right now in my Eastern Conference power rankings, behind Atlanta, but it's not that far off. And then I do think that there's probably a solid, for me, sized gap between them and number 6.
That's fair.
All right. Well, there were a lot of guys that had breakout seasons last year in the NBA. We're going to dive into our power rankings of who those guys were next, right here on Locked On NBA Game Night. Thank you for checking out Locked On NBA Game Night. And if you're watching us on YouTube right now, do us a favor, hit that thumbs up button for us, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest from us. So we've talked a lot today about who we expect to go out and have their first true great season next year. But I do want to spend a little bit of time on who we think had some great seasons last year. So the way we're going to do this, Swipa, I want your top 3 breakout seasons from the 2024-2025 NBA season, starting with number 3. Who do you have?
Man, what a great season. Well, how many players actually took some real leaps? You know what? I'm going to start with a little bit of an obvious pick here. I'm going to give it to J-Dub. J-Dub, I think, vaulted himself into a different conversation. I think a lot of people were really high on Jalen Williams, and a lot of people thought that he had the ability to be an all-NBA player. But not only did he, I think, meet the expectation, I think he outshot them as well. I mean, he scored 40 points in the NBA Finals game. Like,
yes,
that's
while
just
dealing with a significant wrist injury.
Yeah, that's just no small feat, you know. Like, and he was one of the 5 best defenders in the sport. I would argue that Chet Holmgren aside, because they only played 32 games, he was the best defender on the Thunder last year, which includes Lou Dort, which includes Alex Caruso, which includes Ihart, which includes Cason Wallace. They have a host of defenders on that team, and he was the very best of them. He's an elite rim protector for a wing. He's an elite on-ball defender. He's an elite off-ball defender. He cares about playing defense. And last year, being a first-team all-defense guy, averaging 21.6, 5.3, and 5.1 assists, 1.6 steals, 48% from the field, 37 from 3. You're just not finding players like that. And to get them where they got them to, and to get them in double digits in the draft, just really now 2 short years ago, like J-Dub is like, it's just incredible, man. I think that he has an even higher ceiling he'll get to, but that's my number 3 on my breakout list.
Yeah, I think that's a great pick. I have him on my list. I don't have him at number 3. I'm actually, and this is funny because this guy won Most Improved Player of the Year, but I'm going to go with Dyson Daniels at number 3 on my breakout list, because going into last season, I think everybody expected him to just continue to be a really good defender. And I don't actually look at anything that he did last year. Like, that stuff's all good. And, you know, he belonged as an all defense member. He created so many steals. It was just obnoxious. Some of those stats that you looked at for how many turnovers he caused. But I look at what he did on the offensive end and think that's what I was really impressed by, because he goes from averaging 5.8 points a game in his second year with the Pelicans, gets traded to Atlanta last offseason, jumps up to 14 points a game while becoming much more efficient. Shot 49% from the field last year compared to 44 the year before. Shot 34% from 3, which, you know, not some great number that's going to impress everybody, but that was up from 31% each of the previous 2 years. I think the steps forward that Dyson took offensively, while that's not ever going to be regarded, I think, is the best part of his game because of how good and impactful as a defender he is. I look at what he did and say, okay, this guy went from somebody that was a very good defender to somebody that I can look at and say, that's a two-way player. That's a big deal. And that's a really big deal to have in the postseason.
Agree. I really like that name. You know, we talked about this a little bit off the air, and, you know, you were like, number 1 overall pick, but I want to give Cade Cunningham credit here, Danny. And the reason I got him in number 2, he played 12 games the year before, and he got a season-ending injury, and everybody kind of not wrote him off, but they didn't know what to expect from him. And a lot of people watched his rookie year and said that, well, even though his numbers and stuff were high, he wasn't affecting the game. He wasn't that good. He wasn't one of the transformative players in the league. So what does he do? He comes back the very next season and averages 26.1 points per game. So he goes from playing 64 games to 12 games, played 62 games, had I think a really good underspoken year, and then comes back, has an all-NBA season, gets Tobias Harris, Jalen Duren, and a little bit of Jaden Ivey and Tim Hardaway Jr. and takes them to the playoffs, the Detroit Pistons. And I think he has a lot of things in his game that he does at a super high level. He is a great playmaker. He's a really good scorer, and especially for the kind of three-point shots that he takes, he's a good three-point shooter. I love watching him drive the basketball and create for other people. I was like surprised, man. Like, I think I had him making second team all NBA this last year, and I just didn't expect that kind of leap from him. And I do think you get credit no matter where you're drafted. I think you get credit from where you transform your game from a year out, year in basis. And to me, man, he had to be my number 2 on this list.
I think that's fair. And I guess my thinking there is just, I think that Cade not being as impactful in previous years was so much less about Cade and so much more about what the Detroit Pistons had around them. And you look back to that situation in the 23-24 season with what that roster was, who was coaching that roster, with Monty Williams just very clearly, not the right fit for that job at that time. I never put any of that on Cade. Like, I don't look at that season and think, yeah, Cade didn't have a good year. Like, he was better this year, but I thought that had the Pistons not been a team that went, I think it was 14-68 or whatever that record was. Like, say that Pistons team is 500. Cade was playing at an all-star level. I just think that when you are that bad organizationally, nobody's going to get that recognition. And truthfully, nobody should get that recognition individually when you're that bad as a team. So I think that is part of it. But like, when they hired JB Bickerstaff and knowing what the rest of that roster looked like the Detroit Pistons being good last year was a zero surprise to me. And part of it was because I have seen firsthand the type of culture that JB Bickerstaff can build in a rebuilding organization. And also because my belief in Cade Cunningham just never wavered, even when he only played 12 games 2 years ago. Like, I just thought, this guy, I don't see how he is not a star in the NBA, in this league. Like, he's just too good.
Yeah, and then my number 1 is Christian Braun. And the reason why I had him here, I was trying to go over, like, breakout. What exactly does that mean? And, man, Christian Braun, y'all, he doubled his production as a basketball player over the course of 1 year. He was averaging 7 points a game and 3.7 rebounds and 1.6 assists the year before. And then he averaged 15.4, 2.6 assists, and 5.2 rebounds. He was given the title as the number 1 defensive stopper for the Denver Nuggets this last season. And also, too, one of the cool things about this is players in NBA history, there are only 3 players that have averaged over 15 points a game at the guard position, a point guard and shooting guard, 15 points a game on 58% from the field. And the other 2 were Johnny Dawkins in 1990, 1991, and Ben Simmons in 1990 and 2020. But the difference is, over the course of last year, Christian Braun shot almost 40% from 3 on low volume, mind you. And then he shot 82.7% from the free throw line, and he shot 64.8% from 2. While also, I think, being number 2 in transition points per game in the NBA. He completely shocked me with just how good he ended up becoming, and who knows what he becomes this year, but Christian Braun is my number 1.
I can't necessarily push back on that. The one question I would ask you, of course, somebody who covers the Nuggets for us here, how much is that 2-point percentage being which is just obscenely high for a guard? How much of that is Christian Braun versus how much of that is Nikola Jokic creating him incredible opportunities?
Well, hey, Jokic didn't win MVP last year, so I mean, I don't know how much I can actually credit. I don't know how much I can actually credit him, for what was happening. But yeah, I mean, look, it's everybody knows. Like, Christian Braun is I said it off the call, but he's a transition dunk merchant, meaning he lives off backdoor cuts, lives off of slashing, lives off of transition basket. So it's obviously a lot of this is Jokic knows who he is and takes advantage of his athleticism. But again, man, you got to do the job. Like, you have to be able to do it. KCP didn't do it, and he took it to a different level as an overall basketball player. Plus the defense he showed in the playoff last year against SGA and others. So that's why I got Christian right there.
So my number 2 was J-Dub. I don't think we need to go over anything because I think you hit the nail on the head there. My number 1, Ivica Zubac. I just think, and I know we're running out of time here, but I thought that the year he had where he was, an all defense guy for the first time, I thought he took a step forward on that end. And I think he took a massive step forward offensively. Had never averaged 12 points a game before, averages nearly 17 points per game. And of course, part of this is, I think, James Harden in the role that he was in with the Clippers, but I thought he took a step forward too this year.
Agree. Yeah, I love Zoo. Zoo is on I had him first team All NBA as well. I think I had him number 2 on my DPOY list this last year as well. And he was anchoring the second best defense in the NBA behind the OKC Thunder in the 34 games that Kawhi Leonard played, I think, as well. So yeah, just terrific season.
Well, thank you for making Locked On NBA Game Night your first listen today. Thank you for making it your first listen every day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. And if you're watching us on YouTube as we get out of here, do us a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for us. Click subscribe. Hit that notification bell. Show will be back tomorrow talking more about the NBA.